Today, we're going deep into one of the biggest immigration developments of recent years, the unprecedented surge in United States visa cancellations. Tens of thousands of foreign citizens have had their U.S. visas revoked across 2025 and into early 2026, more than 100,000 in total, smashing records and creating shockwaves around the world. What's driving this dramatic increase? What kinds of visas are being revoked, and what this means for students, workers, families, and travelers? I'm going to break it all down for you in clear, straightforward terms so you can understand exactly what's happening and why it matters. The U.S. State Department itself confirmed that more than 100,000 visas were revoked in 2025 alone, an astonishing figure that represents an approximately 150% increase compared to the previous year. In 2024, the total was closer to 40,000, meaning the number of cancellations has more than doubled in a very short period of time. To truly understand why this spike has occurred, we need to look at the context in which these revocations are taking place. Visa cancellation isn't a new concept. The U.S. government has always had the legal authority to revoke visas when certain conditions are met. What's changed is the scale, the criteria being applied, and the policy direction under the current administration. For many foreign nationals, having a visa revoked can be sudden, shocking, and enormously disruptive, with consequences for their ability to travel, work, study, or live in the U.S. The first major factor behind the surge has been a broad enforcement push focused on national security and public safety. U.S. government officials have publicly emphasized that one of the main reasons visas are being revoked is because the holders have been charged or convicted with crimes ranging from assault and theft to driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. In official statements, the State Department has framed these revocations as part of an effort to protect American citizens by removing foreign nationals who are seen as potential risks to public safety or national security. In practical terms, this means that visa holders who have had recent run-ins with law enforcement, including arrests or criminal charges, are now much more likely to have their visas pulled than in the past. In some cases, arrests or convictions that might have previously resulted only in a fine or probation could now trigger a visa cancellation. This stricter enforcement standard reflects not just a policy preference, but a broader shift toward more aggressive immigration control. In addition to violent crimes and serious offenses, even lesser infractions like DUIs or other misdemeanor charges can trigger a revocation, and in 2025, many such cases were recorded. The criteria for triggering a review and potential cancellation have been widened, meaning a far broader range of legal issues might now be enough to shorten someone's stay or bar their return entirely. A second major development has been the increased use of enhanced vetting procedures and continuous monitoring tools. U.S. immigration authorities have implemented what they call a continuous vetting center, a system that constantly reviews visa holders' backgrounds after a visa has been issued. This means that someone who was granted a visa months or even years ago can be flagged and have their visa pulled if new information surfaces that raises concerns about their eligibility or behavior. In previous eras, once a visa was granted, periodic reevaluation was rare unless there was a specific reason. Now, however, the continuous tracking of visa holders' legal records, social media presence, and public interactions allows authorities to identify potential red flags in real time. If anything in a person's history appears problematic, whether it's a criminal record update, arrest information, or other data flagged in law enforcement databases, the revocation process can kick in. This form of continuous vetting has made the visa system far less static and far more responsive to new information, which on the one hand is intended to increase security, but on the other hand means far greater uncertainty for foreign visitors and residents. Another major category driving the increase in visa cancellations has been student visas. Throughout 2025, tens of thousands of F1 and J1 student visas have been revoked as part of this enforcement surge. Some of these cancellations have been tied to visa overstays, discrepancies in student status, or failure to comply with U.S. immigration rules concerning enrollment requirements and academic progress. But alongside those legitimate procedural reasons, there have also been cases where students lost their visa status due to arrests or minor legal issues, including misdemeanor charges and even traffic violations in some reports. For example, international students have reported visa revocations after arrests related to underage drinking, minor altercations, or nonviolent offenses that, in normal circumstances, would not have jeopardized their ability to study and remain in the U.S. In some contexts, visa cancellation has also been applied to students connected with political activism or protests, especially when authorities perceive their participation as potentially linked to national security law. While controversial, these interpretations have been made under broad discretion that immigration officials exercise when assessing whether an individual's continued presence might be harmful or contrary to U.S. interests. It's also important to understand that when a student visa is revoked, it doesn't necessarily mean the student is deported immediately, but it does mean they can no longer re-enter the U.S. once they depart. It also places pressure on their legal status and long-term prospects if they are still enrolled in a U.S. school. This level of uncertainty has significantly affected international student communities, campus life, and university planning for the fall semesters. But beyond individuals and specific cases, there's a systemic shift happening in U.S. immigration policy. The current administration has adopted a strategy focused on restricting visa issuance and reducing legal pathways for immigration. This includes measures like the suspension of immigrant visa processing for citizens of 75 countries, based on the belief that certain applicants might become a public charge or burden on government resources. When paired with the visa revocation surge, this creates a dual effect. Fewer visas are being granted in the first place, and a large number of previously granted visas are being revoked. For many potential immigrants, visitors, or even long-term residents, this means visa security is far less predictable than it used to be. Another angle to consider is how the political climate and foreign policy tensions influence revocation decisions. In some diplomatic disputes, the U.S. has targeted the visas of officials or individuals linked to foreign governments or controversial policies. For example, in diplomatic disagreements with countries such as Brazil, some government officials have had their U.S. visas canceled as a form of political leverage or retaliation. This shows that visa revocations are not only occurring because of individual legal violations, but are sometimes used as tools within broader geopolitical strategies. This dynamic adds another layer of complexity to the global perception of U.S. immigration policy. It's not just about crime and security, it's also about influence and diplomatic signaling. One of the consequences of all this is that the U.S. immigration system has become significantly more administrative and less judicial in nature. In a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling, visa revocations were affirmed as largely discretionary decisions by immigration authorities, meaning individuals have limited judicial recourse to challenge cancellations once they occur. In other words, courts have fewer grounds to overturn a visa cancellation than they once did. This discretionary power reinforces the authority of immigration officials and reduces the ability of visa holders to contest revocations in court. As a result, if a visa is revoked, often the only options are administrative appeals or reapplication, both of which can be uncertain, expensive, and time-consuming. From a global perspective, these changes have sent a clear message. U.S. immigration policy is becoming more enforcement-oriented and security-driven, with stricter standards not just at the point of entry, but throughout a visa's validity period. Whether someone is a tourist, a student, a worker, or a long-term resident, their visa can now be subject to ongoing review, and any perceived issue, legal, administrative, or security-related, can trigger a cancellation. And while authorities argue this protects national interests, civil liberties advocates, universities, and foreign governments have expressed serious concern. They warn that expanded revocations, especially in cases where allegations are minor or still under legal review, undermine fairness and damage international relationships. In the coming months and years, it's likely that visa cancellation trends will continue to evolve as both U.S. policy and global migration patterns adapt to shifting political priorities and security concerns. For anyone who holds a visa or is planning to apply for one, it's more important than ever to stay informed about legal obligations, maintain compliance with all conditions of your visa, and be aware that the environment has changed significantly from just a few years ago. That's a comprehensive look at why U.S. visa cancellations have soared and what it means for millions of people around the world. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss Part 2, where we'll break down specific visa categories, personal stories, and practical tips on how to protect your status and avoid cancellations in 2026 and beyond. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is believing that visa cancellation only happens to people who do something very serious or criminal. In reality, the data from 2025 and early 2026 shows that many visa cancellations are happening in situations that would have been considered minor or manageable just a few years ago. This is because the philosophy of immigration enforcement has changed. The system is no longer reactive, it is proactive and preventive. To understand this, you need to understand one critical fact. A U.S. visa is not a right. It is a privilege granted at the discretion of the U.S. government. Even if a visa is valid for 5 or 10 years, it can still be revoked at any moment if immigration authorities believe the holder no longer meets eligibility requirements or poses a potential risk. This legal principle is at the heart of the recent surge. Let's talk about how visa revocation actually happens. In most cases, the visa holder is not interviewed again. There is no court hearing. There is no judge involved. Instead, immigration authorities rely on internal databases that constantly receive updates from law enforcement agencies, border security systems, and intelligence sources. If a person's name appears in a system update connected to an arrest, investigation, legal charge, or compliance issue, that information can trigger an internal review. Once a review is triggered, a consular officer or State Department official has the authority to revoke the visa without notifying the individual in advance. Many people only discover their visa has been canceled when they attempt to travel, re-enter the United States, or check their visa status online. In some cases, people already inside the U.S. find out their visa is revoked after receiving an email from the embassy or through their school or employer. This leads to another misunderstanding. Visa revocation does not always mean immediate deportation. A visa is primarily a travel document. If a visa is revoked while someone is already in the U.S., their ability to remain depends on their immigration status, not the visa itself. However, once they leave the U.S., they cannot return without applying for a new visa. This creates long-term uncertainty and fear, especially for students and workers who depend on travel for emergencies, research, or family reasons. International students have been among the most affected groups in this wave of cancellations. In 2025, thousands of F1 and J1 visas were revoked not only for overstays or status violations, but also for arrests that did not result in convictions. In the past, an arrest alone might not have been enough to cancel a student's visa. Now, in many cases, it is. For students, this is especially damaging because a visa revocation can destroy years of academic planning. Imagine being halfway through a degree, paying international tuition, and suddenly losing the ability to travel or renew your status because of a minor legal issue or administrative discrepancy. Universities have reported growing anxiety among international students, many of whom now avoid travel altogether out of fear that they won't be allowed back into the country. Workers on employment-based visas have also been hit hard. Professionals on H-1B, L-1, and other work visas are facing increased scrutiny, particularly if they change employers, travel frequently, or are involved in corporate restructuring. Even administrative errors, such as outdated employment information or mismatches in job roles, can lead to reviews and cancellations. In a more aggressive enforcement environment, immigration authorities are far less forgiving of inconsistencies. Another major factor driving cancellations is the expansion of the public charge concept. While traditionally associated with green card applications, the logic behind public charge concerns is now influencing visa enforcement more broadly. Authorities are increasingly focused on whether visa holders might rely on public benefits in the future. Financial instability, job loss, or long periods of unemployment can now raise red flags that were previously ignored. This is especially concerning for people from developing countries or unstable economies. Even if someone entered the U.S. legally and complied with all rules, sudden changes in their financial situation can make them vulnerable to scrutiny. This approach reflects a broader shift toward economic self-sufficiency as a core immigration value, even for temporary visa holders. Social media and digital footprints have also become part of the modern enforcement landscape. Although the government does not publicly disclose exactly how social media is monitored, it is well documented that online activity can be reviewed during visa applications and post-issuance reviews. Content perceived as extremist, threatening, or politically sensitive can trigger additional scrutiny. Even content taken out of context may raise concerns in an automated system. This has created a chilling effect. Many visa holders now self-censor online, fearing that political opinions, jokes, or associations could be misinterpreted. Whether this fear is always justified or not, it reflects a real shift in how people perceive their vulnerability within the U.S. immigration system. Another overlooked driver of visa cancellations is diplomatic and geopolitical tension. When relations between the U.S. and another country deteriorate, visa policies often become stricter. Officials, business leaders, and even ordinary citizens from certain countries may experience higher rates of visa refusal or revocation during these periods. Visas, in this sense, become tools of foreign policy, not just immigration control. The impact of all this goes far beyond individuals. Universities are losing international students. Companies are struggling to retain global talent. Families are being separated. Tourism is affected. When visa policies become unpredictable, people hesitate to make long-term commitments involving the United States. At the same time, supporters of stricter enforcement argue that these measures are necessary to maintain national security and restore trust in the immigration system. They point out that visas should not shield individuals from accountability and that continuous vetting helps identify risks that might not have been visible at the time of application. From this perspective, the surge in cancellations is a sign that the system is working as intended. Critics, however, argue that the system lacks transparency and proportionality. They say too many cancellations happen without explanation, due process, or the opportunity to respond. They warn that treating arrests the same as convictions undermines fundamental legal principles and disproportionately harms vulnerable populations. So where does this leave visa holders and applicants going forward? The reality is that the environment has fundamentally changed. In 2026 and beyond, holding a U.S. visa will require more than just initial approval. It will require ongoing compliance, caution, and awareness. Small mistakes now carry bigger consequences. For those planning to apply for a visa, preparation is more important than ever. Accurate documentation, honesty, and a clear understanding of visa conditions are critical. For those already holding visas, staying informed, avoiding legal trouble, and maintaining status compliance is essential. It's also important to remember that visa policies can change again. Immigration law is deeply tied to politics, and future administrations may adjust enforcement priorities. However, the infrastructure for continuous monitoring and enforcement is now firmly in place, which means heightened scrutiny is likely to remain a long-term feature of the system. Ultimately, the surge in visa cancellations is not just about numbers. It's about a shift in how immigration is viewed, from a system of opportunity to a system of risk management. Whether this leads to greater security or greater exclusion is a debate that will continue for years. What is clear is this: anyone connected to the U.S. immigration system must now navigate it with greater care, awareness, and realism than ever before.